Welcome back to part 2 of this run through the 2005 AP Microeconomics exam. As I finished part 1, I realized I epically failed in my goal of going a little bit faster. But oh well, don't matter. I got all kinds of time. It's only, 10:02. So let's have some more fun. I'm super excited about this. Okay, that was a little bit sarcastic, but I do enjoy this more than I should. Anyway, let's continue. As always, I would suggest pausing after I read the question, look through the answers, see if you can answer it yourself, and then maybe listen to the explanation. And again, it's just an explanation off the top of my head, so it's kind of my thought process as I go through the problems. Anyway, number 16. The study of economics is primarily concerned with which of the following? Oh, this is easy. I hope you find it easy too. The main study of economics is concerned with which of the following? It's the allocation of scarce resources given limited wants. Be nice to think that we care about all these other things, but the main thing is that we have that problem of scarcity, and that's what economics is all about. Number 17. Mr. Carpenter devotes his working time to producing tables and chairs. An increase in the demand for chairs will result in what? Well, what do you think is going to happen? I guess if he can get more money, if the demand for chairs goes up, he can maybe sell more of them at a higher profit. That would mean no, he wouldn't increase his time devoted to producing tables. It would increase the opportunity costs of producing tables because what he's giving up are those more valuable chairs. So yeah, I like that. It wouldn't have anything to do with the price of lumber. It wouldn't decrease the price of chairs. If anything, it would increase them. And that shouldn't decrease his total revenue. That would hopefully increase it. Okay, number 18. Assume that both the supply of and the demand for a good are relatively price elastic. The imposition of a per unit excise tax on the sale of the good would cause the equilibrium price and quantity to change in which of the following ways? We kind of looked at taxes in class earlier, but if you add a tax, honestly, it doesn't actually matter. It has the same effect if you add the tax. You're really going to be driving up the end price. It's kind of like a shift back, and it's like an input cost added on here. So there we go. We've got an added cost to the tax, and so price level is going to go up from what it was, and the quantity is going to go down. I'll go with C. Number 19. Assume that that consumers consider potatoes to be an inferior good, but consider rice to be a normal good. An increase in consumers' income will most likely affect the equilibrium price and quantity of potatoes and rice in which of the following ways? Alright, well, if, let's see, potatoes are an inferior good. So if income goes up, the demand for potatoes will go down, so the price of potatoes should go down, and the quantity of potatoes should also go down. Alright, so it's not that, or that. How about rice? Well, rice, it'll be the opposite effect, right? If rice is a normal good, demand, supply, demand would go up. So the price of potatoes would increase and the quantity would increase. I'll go with A. Number 20. Assume that a consumer spends all of her income on the purchase of two goods. If this consumer's income doubles and the price of the two goods... Sorry, I'm going to pause this and go finish this video elsewhere, because you probably don't want to hear washing dishes in the background. Alright, that was only a second for you, but there was a little distracting going on in the kitchen for me where I was working. So now I am downstairs, and we're on number 20. Assume that a consumer spends all of her income on the purchase of two goods. If the consumer's income doubles and the price of the two goods also double, the quantity of the two goods purchased will, well, if the income is, if I used to make $100 and I'd spend it on those two things, and now I make $200, but the price of those two things has gone up, I don't think I'm going to be able to purchase any more of them than I used to. So I don't think that's going to change. That seems simple enough. Almost too easy. Alright, number 21. Economies of scale. Ooh, this is important. Economies of scale. The whole idea of economies of scale is that in the long run, I'll be able to decrease the cost of production. Because you can think, you know, if you're thinking of a firm in the short run, their average total cost looks like that. Well, maybe in the long run, if they try to, average total cost, there we go. Maybe in the long run, as they try to build more machinery and they become more efficient, actually lower their average total costs, and maybe they'll shift out like average total, oh, my handwriting's horrible over there, and we'll actually be able to decrease what our lowest total cost could be. And so as long as we're able to continue by scaling up, decrease our total costs, that is economies of scale. So yeah, economies of scale exist. First of all, it's definitely going to be something in the long run. If you read that, that doesn't work. So it's going to be long run average total costs decrease as output increases. Now eventually, oftentimes, you'll run into a limit of how far that can go down, and so you have economies of scale for a while, and then eventually you stop having economies of scale. Number 22. Locotech produces toy trains and pays each worker $350 per week. 5 workers can produce 40 trains per week. 6 workers can produce 45 trains per week. The marginal product per week of the 6th worker is? Ooh, this is a good question. The marginal product is just the additional number of products that you get from the 6th worker, and obviously that 6th worker you go from 40 to 45, and so it's 5 trains. The marginal revenue product of that 6th worker would be those 5 trains times however many, however much you were able to sell them for. The marginal cost of that 6th worker was $350. But again, the marginal product is how many additional products we get. And that was 5 trains. 23. If the only 2 firms in an industry successfully collude to maximize their joint profit, the price for this product will be. Well, in that case, they're actually operating a lot like a monopoly. If you remember, in a monopoly, it looks kind of like this, where you have demand, also known as average revenue, marginal revenue, and we're going to produce at that point there, and the price we charge is way up there, and the average cost based on this graph is there, and I have this nice profit. So what is true? If I'm acting like a if I'm an oligopoly that's acting like a monopoly to maximize that profit, the price for the product is going to be not above the monopoly price. It will be above the marginal cost of production, yeah, because there's the marginal product cost, and I'm going to charge a price higher than that. So I'm going to go with C. Moving on, 24. If there are many firms in an industry and each firm's product is indistinguishable from the products of all other firms, the individual firm's demand curve will be... this to me sounds like perfect competition, and if it's perfect competition, then we have a horizontal demand curve. I'm a price taker. I can sell as many or as few as I want at the market price, and so my demand curve that I face is horizontal. Number 25. A monopoly is different from perfect competition, from a perfectly competitive firm, in that a monopoly very well could have the same cost curves, so that's not true. Has an average... No, it has the same cost curves. Has a marginal revenue curve that lies below its demand curve. That's the big difference, right? Because for perfectly competitive firms, as price takers, their demand curve is that perfectly horizontal one, and thus marginal revenue, because they can sell as many as they want at that given price. The revenue of each one is the same amount, so their marginal revenue curve is the demand curve, and it's horizontal. But for a monopoly, the only thing driving their prices is the demand curve, and if they lower their prices, they can increase their quantity, but the marginal revenue then is lower unless they can price discriminate. Their marginal revenue is going to be below the demand curve. Monopoly normally earns economic profits, but be very careful when you read an answer that says always. There could be instances where a monopoly doesn't earn an economic profit, and a monopoly will never operate in the inelastic segment, because that's where the marginal revenue is below zero, so lowering their prices and increasing production is just going to cause them to lose revenue. Alright, 26. Price discrimination. Oh, I just talked about that. Anyway, price discrimination occurs when, and has nothing to do with the elasticity of the supply, doesn't have anything to do with the product's average cost. When differences in products' price reflect... No. Here we go. E. Price discrimination is when we differentiate products' price not because of different costs in production, but simply because of what people are willing to pay. That's what price discrimination is. We basically try to charge everyone as much as they're willing to pay. So the differences in product price aren't as a result of different costs in production. It's only because of people's different demands and their own preferences. Whew, there we go. Number 27. If a 5% wage increase in a particular labor market results in a 10% decrease in employment, the demand for the labor is... So what did we say? We had a 5%... Remember, elasticity is that percent change in quantity as compared to the percent change in price. In this case, it's wage. Oops, not dollar. Oops. Do that as percent. So a 5% increase in wage, we get a much bigger percent change in, and obviously it's negative and positive, but again, the most important thing is that the absolute value of this is greater than 1. That is really the definition of elastic. It's not perfectly elastic, because then the wage increase would be like then there'd be no one employed, but it's definitely relatively elastic. Oh, number 28. According to the information in the table above, the 12th worker would increase the hourly profit by how much? So we're looking at the 12th worker. So if I hire 12 workers, I'm paying them an hourly wage of $5.20. The marginal factor cost is $6.30 an hour. This is the case of I'm now hiring. I went from 11 to 12, so to get to 12 I had to pay them more, but that also meant I had to pay all of the other ones, all my other previous 11, $5.20 instead of $5.10. So yeah, that's why that marginal factor is actually much higher. And they are getting a little bit less efficient here, so my marginal revenue product, the additional revenue that I get from them is only from that 12th worker is only $7.60. So the 12th worker would increase the hourly profit by, looks like it should be the difference between the additional cost and the additional revenue, and I'm making $1.30 over what I used to make. So I'm going to go with C. Sorry, 29. Characteristics of a pure public good include which of the following? Non-paying customers cannot be excluded from consuming the good. Consumption by any one person does not reduce the availability of the good to the others. And 3, the amount consumed depends on the price paid. For a pure public good, that's really something that you can't exclude people from. So yeah, non-paying consumers can't be excluded. And consumption by any one person doesn't reduce the availability to others. I think maybe the good example of this would be like if I posted the answers to this to the AP exam coming up. If I posted them online, there's no way that I could exclude paying customers, and just because one person used it wouldn't really reduce the availability to anybody else. But the amount consumed does not depend on the price paid because, again, non-paying consumers can't be excluded, so it's definitely D. And lastly for this section, number 30, which of the following tends to increase the gap in earnings between skilled and unskilled workers over time? Alright, if there's an increase in the demand for unskilled workers relative to skilled workers, that would actually drive up the wages of unskilled workers more than the wage of the skilled workers might be going up. So that would actually decrease the gap. I don't like that. An increase in the supply of skilled workers. Well, an increase in the supply of skilled workers, I'm just using the supply and demand graph, that actually would drive down wages, so for skilled workers. So no. A decrease in the demand for unskilled workers. Okay, yeah, these two things, sorry, my brain stopped for a second there. Those two things would actually close the gap a little bit. But if there was a decrease in the demand for unskilled workers, that would mean wages for unskilled workers are really dropping, and that would increase the gap. A decrease in the demand for both the demand for and supply of skilled workers. Well, if they both drop, hard to know what would happen to wages, so that would not necessarily do it. And an increase in the demand for and supply of unskilled workers, again, that would not necessarily drive up wages for unskilled workers, so no. Alright, so that is the end of this video. Come back in a few minutes and we will do another 15 of these problems.